Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, proud to represent California, where at a minimum, we're increasingly concerned about the impact of wildfires, but we are no strangers to the impact of sustained drought, the impact of growing impact of atmospheric rivers, the flooding that they cause, and more. So we're seeing at all ends of the climate change spectrum. Let me take a moment to thank all of our witnesses for participating, those of you in person, Mr. Mayor, virtually, as the representative of the other Hollywood. Just want to thank you for your service. We should do some sort of an exchange program. We'll come visit, you come visit. There's a lot to learn from each other. But getting to the topic at hand here, I think as you all know, the Treasury Department's Federal Insurance Office report from January underscores what we in California have known for a long time now, that while this issue may be more prominent, may be more intense in what are considered disaster-prone areas of the United States, the reality is that there is no region in the country that's exempt or immune from the increasing severe threats posed by climate change. I see a lot of heads nodding in the audience, so I'm glad this is striking a chord here. The impacts are no longer confined to just the coastal or historically high-risk areas that have been the focus of conversation and some of the research that's now available. But because we see the impacts now extending to every community, including reaching inland areas and regions that have in the past been considered low risk. This is further illustrated by the number of new and expanded state-based mitigation programs to support not just home hardening on an individual basis. I think Senator Warren was articulate with that in her comments and her questions, but also to community-wide resilience projects, which Chairman or Ranking Member Whitehouse and I have spoken about repeatedly in the insurance context. So I want to take a moment to highlight a bill that I've worked on with Senators Tillis, Schiff, and Cassidy that would exempt from federal income taxes the payments from these programs so that our constituents can realize the maximum funding available towards risk mitigation and resilience measures. Dr. Mulder, you mentioned in your testimony that evidence-based policymaking will require more data to determine which adaptation measures are actually cost-effective, which are most cost-effective. Given the challenges that Treasury faced just in collecting data for its January report, how can the federal government more effectively coordinate the collection of this important information?
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Yes, I completely agree that data collection is going to be the cornerstone of how to effectively expand out these programs. Right? There's only going to be so many resources that we can commit, and in addition, these sorts of measures can have real costs for homeowners. So you want to do the things that are going to really reduce losses and premiums enough to justify the investment. And we've seen, so for example, in data with some of the new building codes that California introduced throughout the 2000s, there's papers, just looking at which homes are burned down after a fire, and it's extremely striking. You see the homes built just after the new codes, much less likely to be burned down. This will eventually translate into lower premiums for homeowners, so this will absolutely be part of the solution. The data collection effort by the Federal Insurance Office is an extremely valuable step in this direction. And you're right that there were some challenges. So for example, my understanding is that data collection efforts in Florida, for example, were significantly hampered. So I think that one step that will be necessary is to try to get something that's increasingly representative. And granularity is also going to be key here. Risk is extremely local. It varies house by house. And insurers view their data on claims as proprietary, right? They're businesses. They're not trying to help everyone else figure out who has the risk. But as policymakers, we are interested in the bigger picture as we try to set policy. So the federal government absolutely has a role to play in terms of being a sort of central place where that sort of data can be gathered, used by researchers, used by policymakers to find solutions.
I mean, it's, I think, an appropriate balance to strive for, right? How much of the property by property more granular data to help inform the policy making, not just for insurers, but for us, with some of that community-wide data. Because you, as an individual homeowner, can do all the right things: your architecture, your design, your building materials, your roof, your siding, your brush clearance, and the creation of defensible space. But if the neighbors around you aren't taking such care and concern, you're compromised. So there's a lot of value in collecting that aggregate data from a community-wide standpoint as well. But let me also ask you about federal data collection and policy making. A lot of states have state-specific programs. How can state-based programs better support communities, particularly those that have historically not faced disasters at this scale?
That's right. Thank you. And I also wanted to just mention what you said about, yes, at the community level, that's absolutely where much of adaptation has to happen. This isn't individual efforts. Stories that have struck me are individual homeowners who built incredibly resilient homes, and then they're the last ones standing in the entire neighborhood. What's the point of returning to your house at that point if everything around you is gone? And homeowners insurance is indeed, this organized at a state level, and that means that state departments of insurance are going to have a big role to play. I see one valuable role is, so I've seen, for example, I think California has versions of this, Alabama has versions of this with its fortified roof program, Florida also has versions of this, certification for homeowners who take, certain adaptive efforts or meet certain construction standards. I think, and I've seen cases too where then that leads to sort of negotiated discounts and premiums with insurers operating in the states. I think that's helpful for homeowners because it lets them know what discount they'll get by being able to meet these standards. And I think it can be helpful for insurers because it means that instead of each insurer having to evaluate these properties on their own, there's a central source of information for which homes have met these standards and which homes are safe.
And if I may, Senator Whitehouse, want to talk a couple questions on the insurance challenges that we've been spending so much time on. As insurers withdraw from markets or threaten to withdraw from markets, but in many cases actually withdrawing from markets due to the increasing risks that they point to posed by climate change, the net effect on consumers is that they're left with fewer and fewer options for homeowners insurance. This leaves homeowners in a difficult position, often forced to accept plans that may not fully cover their needs simply because there were no additional alternatives. So we're struggling to ensure that there's affordable and meaningful insurance options for homeowners. These limitations are impacting access and the overall health of the mortgage market itself, because if you can't insure your home, then you can't get a mortgage for that home purchase. So addressing this challenge requires ensuring that insurance markets function properly to provide that affordable, comprehensive, meaningful insurance options for consumers. And as we've seen, state and federal backstops have become neither affordable nor sustainable in the long term. And while states should remain the primary regulators of insurance, increasingly people are wondering what the federal role can be in either buttressing those markets or offering alternatives. Dr. Mulder, has the mortgage market already begun to see the knock-on effects of the property insurance crisis because of disasters?
There is growing evidence that mortgage markets are being affected by the trends that we're seeing in the homeowners insurance market. As we've seen this period of unprecedented increase in premiums, that's been tied to mortgage performance data, and we see that when people have a sudden increase in their premium, that tends to lead them to fall behind on their payments. And after a disaster, you often see cases where people are underinsured, and that can again sort of lead to issues around prepayment of mortgages, difficulty in getting a new mortgage, difficulty in rebuilding a home fully, or in cases where homeowners might sell instead of rebuilding because you don't have the ability to get a mortgage to rebuild, you don't have the ability to use your homeowner's coverage to rebuild, and so you see that increasing turnover in these communities. So absolutely, the homeowners insurance market, ideally it should be this boring thing that sort of supports the mortgage market and is saying that people don't have to think about. But what we're seeing is that it's becoming a real barrier to efficient home transactions.
Are there any legislative proposals that you're aware of currently in Congress that would help solve the problem here? And I'm not talking about bailing out industry, whether it's on the mortgage side or on the insurance side. That's just a Band-Aid. Any true legislative proposals that are part of the solution here?
I can't speak to any specific legislative proposals at this point, and it's always going to get bogged down in the details on these things, right? But what I can speak to at a high level, when I think about the way that state fair plans work, these insurers of last resort, the logic of insurers is generally to pool their risk. And at the state level, that's a difficult thing to pull off, right? You're kind of by definition probably looking at a lot of policyholders who face the same risks. So the problem, as you said, you frame it as a bailout of the insurers. You don't want the insurer of last resort to be the one ending up with all the policies that no one else wants. At the end of the day, someone does have to bear this risk, and in terms of the prices, you want those to reflect the risk, promote adaptation in terms of where people build. So I think that's the tension if in any such program would be to be having a rating structure. The federal government has an ability to bear this catastrophic risk potentially if you think of them as an insurer of last resort, but you'd want the prices to reflect the very real risk that's happening in this market.
Thank you very much.